It is day 199 of the second Trump administration, if you are keeping track. And in just under 1 hour, President Trump's reciprocal tariffs on imports from nearly 70 different countries will take effect. It is all part of his effort to reorder global trade. So we're going to start tonight with money, power, politics. This week, some countries like Switzerland made a last-ditch effort to negotiate a trade deal. But this afternoon, the Swiss president left D.C. empty-handed. The country is now facing a 39% tariff. Also today, Trump decided to double tariffs on India as punishment for buying Russian oil. Back on August 27th, on August 27th, the rate will then spike from 25% to 50%. And earlier today, at an event unveiling Apple's new U.S. investment, the president said he is planning to put a 100% tariff on a key tech component.
We'll be putting a tariff on of approximately 100% on chips and semiconductors. The good news for companies like Apple is if you're building in the United States or have committed to build, without question committed to build in the United States, there will be no charge. In other words, we're not going to be charging. So a lot of countries, a lot of companies are leaving various other places and they're coming to the United States.
There will be no charge. So in other words, we're not going to charge. So let's just break this down. In a world of tariffs and trade wars, the White House is now thrilled that Apple plans on investing an additional $100 billion in the U.S. to buy more parts here. But here's what you need to know. Back in February, they announced to spend $500 billion and hire 20,000 people in the U.S. over the next 4 years. And the New York Times notes this. Apple has a mixed record on fulfilling those investment promises. So my question tonight, did Tim Cook basically show us today he knows exactly how to work Donald Trump to avoid tariffs? Maybe. Let's bring in our nightcap and find out. Sam Stein is here, managing editor for The Bulwark and an MSNBC political contributor. Dan Nathan, CNBC contributor and host of the Risk Reversal podcast. And Basil Smikle, Democratic strategist and former executive director of the New York State Democratic Party. He is now an MSNBC political analyst and Columbia University professor. Dan Nathan, you know I'm going to you first. U.S. tariffs will be at a level not seen in almost a century. We're going to talk about Apple and chips in a second. Is this workable for our economy in the long term?
No, I mean, you use the term reorienting global trade, right? And so when you think about, China has been the bugaboo for nearly 25 years or so, right? Mm-hmm. When you think about forced technology transfer, it's been a really hard place for a lot of U.S. companies to do business, right? So I think all of us could agree that that is kind of a reasonable target at first. But when you think about these tariffs, we really went after our allies first, right? So it was Canada, it was Mexico, it was the EU, and we don't have deals with Canada or Mexico. And if you think back to the first administration, I mean, remember the USMCA, which was really NAFTA? Now we are negotiating with the same folks that we just kind of ripped up that deal. So I think there are some countries where it's going to work out really well. I think all folks, economists, strategists, and the like, kind of feel like this is a great place to be with China, but we're kind of backing down. You remember the whole taco trade sort of thing? And that goes back to...
When you say work out really well compared to where we thought we'd be with Trump tariffs 2 months ago, or work out really well with where we were this time last year?
Well, I mean, this time last year, we had basically 2.5% tariffs on most imports that were coming in here. So now if you just look at some of the rates where we've done these framework sort of deals, if you look at EU, if you look at Japan, I mean, we're talking about almost 10x where we were a year ago.
So is it fair for you to be like, oh, things look great for some countries? That's not great to where we were last year.
No, especially when you're bullying them. I mean, I guess the point is like the China thing I would have gone at first, right? And I would have kind of like sorted out some of the other stuff. I wouldn't gone after our allies here. So the China thing, I think we can all agree, let's go after it. There's one point about China, though, right now, is that they are growing GDP at about 5%. We just booked 1.25 for the first half of this year, right? So at some way, you can say to yourself, we actually have more to lose. And I think the Chinese, which are stimulating their economy and their consumers right now, they can probably hold out. I mean, that's obviously a dictatorship, that sort of thing. So I guess What I'm saying is your original question was, is this going to be better for us in the future? And I would say, given where our economy is right now, we have that jobs data, we have a consumer that's weakening. I would say that these tariffs as a tax are going to weigh on consumers, are going to weigh on companies who have to actually absorb a bit of this. And then you're going to see probably an uptick in unemployment right now. So the near term, I think we're probably going to have some difficult times. But I also say that the frameworks are not really deals. And I think we have the potential to kind of get worse into a protracted trade war if we don't have some of this stuff work itself out soon.
Sam, some people are saying Tim Cook found the ultimate loophole today, right, for the tariffs. Donald Trump loves standing at the White House saying, look, you're going to manufacture here, you will not have to pay any tariffs.
Right.
Apple can do that, right? $100 billion is chump change to a company that mints money in the way Apple does. For industries out there that are low margin, struggling industries, they can't do this. But Trump is saying this is the example. Who's going to follow suit?
Well, first, I want to thank Trump for explaining what there will be no charge means. It was a very complicated term.
It means there will be none.
Without the explanation, I would have been totally lost. Secondly, to your point, this is, and not to disagree too much with him, but
Please
I think
do.
the problem is you can't predict the future because we can't predict the future. I mean, everything is so transactional, right? So with Apple, you come in and you say, yeah, we'll do $100 billion more in investment, and here's a plaque, which Tim Cook did, give Trump a plaque of glass with some gold base, and Trump was obviously, jubilant over it. He's like, oh my God, this is the greatest. And then Apple gets a reprieve from these tariffs on semiconductors and chips. And the same thing's holding true with Japan, which is, promising $500 billion in investment, but it's unclear if it's actually coming through. So these aren't actually a strategic or comprehensive tariff regime. These are discrete, singular transactions that are designed by companies or countries to please Trump because he has exercised this tariff authority in such unpredictable ways. So what do we know about the future? Nothing, because Trump could wake up tomorrow and say, you know what? I want to squeeze a little bit more out of Apple. This is an unpredictability that I don't think is good for the economy. And if you're talking about isolating China, which I agree is probably the most important thing to do here, Trump really did step away from the actual one way to do it, which was the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That was in his first term. You build great trading alliances with every region around China, isolate them in the region, and then, turn up the dial. And he just decided not to do that. And so we're in this weird place where we're just sort of waking up and it's the whims of Trump that we get new tariff policies, and it's up to Tim Cook to figure out what plaque to give him in order to get away from those tariffs.
But can we also talk about the truth? Because the argument is we are going to bring jobs back, we're going to bring manufacturing back. We saw in the White House today, a reporter asked the president or asked the president to talk about the fact that he has brought back $17 trillion in investments. That would be more than half of U.S. GDP.
Right.
That obviously hasn't happened. The last jobs report showed that we've just lost 11,000 jobs. So how important is it that this White House, to the point you can't predict the future, what they're presenting to the American people about the trillions we're bringing in and the investment is not connected to what's actually happening out there?
Well, it's not connected, and he's not really connecting on this, because to kind of bring the 2 points that you both were making together, there is a lot of concern. The jobs numbers are not great, and because they weren't great, he fired the person who reported them. So clearly, American voters are saying something's going on here. We are 14, 15 months away from the midterm elections. So tell me how all of this deal making and unpredictability is going to bring certainty to the voter as we go into these midterm elections. That is unlikely to happen. It seems to me, and I think you touched on this, there are a small number of companies that may benefit from what he's doing. But by and large, the average company, the average small business is going to get hurt. Those Dollar Tree stores in certain neighborhoods are going to be hurt. Those small mom and pop stores are going to be hurt. And voters are going to feel this. Now, it's up to Democrats on the other side to kind of raise this issue and talk about it in a way that actually does hit and touch that voter. But the reality is, if they aren't feeling it now, the concern is that they will feel it. And look, in honor of Jamaican Independence Day today,
and your tie.
as my tie, my Jamaican family would say, those that cannot hear must feel. And while I would not wish any hardships on anybody, there will come a point in time when the American voter is really going to feel the effect of this, and it's going to play out at the polls. And I don't think that the Trump administration, frankly, cares at this point.
Should we expect another Tim Cook-like announcement tomorrow? Because the president said, today, 100% tariffs, on chips, semiconductors. We should expect that. At the same time, he's meeting with the CEO of NVIDIA. If there is a CEO out there with the ability to write the biggest Price Waterhouse check you've ever seen, Ed McMahon style, it's that company. So should we expect that Trump is basically saying to them, go the way of Tim Cook and your tariffs will go that way as well?
Yeah, Jensen Huang, the CEO of that company, has already done that, right? This is the first $4 trillion market cap company the world has ever seen. And so Jensen was dealing with the potential for export bans to China. NVIDIA makes the most high-end chips that are training the most important models as it relates to generative AI right now. And so the notion that we don't want them to get our technology, that's something that Jensen, for all intents and purposes, has actually, I don't think this is in our country's best interest, but he thinks it's in his shareholders' best interest, right? And I think that's really important. A couple months ago, they took a $5.5 billion charge because they were not able to sell chips into China. And all of a sudden, he finds himself in Mar-a-Lago, in the White House. This is the CEO of NVIDIA. And now we are selling some of our most advanced chips from NVIDIA. And the other point I just want to make about Apple here is, like you said, did he just play Trump? He did play Trump. He did it in the first administration, too. iPhones got exempted from tariffs when we put them on in 2018 or so. But then you have to say to yourself, okay, well, Tim Cook, again, has a fiduciary responsibility to his shareholders. He has responsibility to his stakeholders. The fact that the White House doesn't get how they're getting played, doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. They just said they're going to spend another $100 billion. They're going to make the glass that goes on the iPhones in Kentucky. You know how much they committed to doing? $2.5 billion. It's like a rounding error on the $600 billion that they've already done. Here's the other thing. If those are made in Kentucky, they have to be shipped to China to be put on the phones and be assembled. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And Tim Cook, while he worked for Steve Jobs, he was the guy who created this ecosystem for their supply chain to have cheap labor, and they had all of their suppliers in and around China and Taiwan, and therefore they could sell their goods here at a price that would make sense if they're not manufactured here.
I don't know if I think I agree with everything, but I'm not sure I can say Trump feels like he got played, because I think
no, he doesn't feel that way. He got played.
Well, nor do I know if he got played, because I think for them the main objective here isn't
the headline.
Yeah, it's the headline. It's not the monetary policy, it's not the tariff policy, it's not the economy per se, although in the macro sense it is, of course. It's the headline. I mean, they love nothing more than waking up and being like, we have a big announcement today, executive signing ceremony, Trump's going to be there, big CEO is going to be there, and we got $100 billion.
Okay, but then, Sam, you just laid it out perfectly. Right. Will it be the American people that got played? Because we're seeing cracks in the U.S. economy. And what are we talking about? Who's coming to the White House? Who's driving the markets? A tiny handful of superstar, massive companies, while just beneath that, people are suffering. I was talking about job loss. 11,000 jobs last month were in manufacturing, right? We lost 11,000 manufacturing jobs. Trump today said prices are all going down since he's president. Manufacturing has not come back. Right. Prices are not going down. So the only one getting played are the people who are turning their TVs off when they're being fed propaganda and saying, man, things are harder.
No, it's a really valid point. And Heather Long at the Washington Post had a great column about this, where there's a bifurcation happening, right? Our economy is being increasingly held up by the rich spenders doing more consumption. There's a few sectors of the economy, healthcare, for instance, being one of them, where you see most of, if not all of the job growth. And so,
where do you think home healthcare workers come from? Other countries.
Correct. And so suddenly you're having a real pinch in the labor market. Combine that with a decrease in spending. And Trump's got few cards to play other than trying to, get countries to commit more money through these tariffs extortions. The other card he can play is, frankly, a PR one, which is you fire the commissioner of the BLS because you say the numbers are rigged ridiculously, and then you have these daily ceremonies where you can tout how much money is supposedly being invested, and then it never comes through in the end, and you just create another investment ceremony where you say, oh, it's happening all over.
And it's like that old argument that Mitch McConnell and others used to promote, the job growers. Remember, job growers, we give all of this money and all these resources to these big businesses, and of course it'll trickle down to the average voter. But not every voter is a shareholder, right? And he does live for the headlines, but the reality is that average voter is going to wait for that trickle down that will not come.